Now, I could have spent another half hour out there looking at the art. I appreciate people coming back in here. We do have refreshments. We have desserts out there. Please help yourself. We want people to be comfortable. Sorry, my back is to you, Jeremiah and Mary. I'll get out of the way in just a moment. Art makes us better doctors and scientists. I learned that from my wife, Jeannie, who is a novelist and one day pointed out actually a paper that demonstrated that doctors who read fiction have better empathy and compassion and understanding of their patients. Isn't that neat? Yeah, yay art. And that's why we've gone to the Flynn as a group, and that's why we're doing this tonight. And I couldn't be more energized and frankly reinforced in our commitment to doing things like this and getting together and having these experiences together. I now have the opportunity of introducing our, what do we call you? Conversationalists? Our artist and interviewer, if you will. You've already heard about Mary Lacy. Dr. Jeremiah Dickerson will be leading our conversation first with Mary, and then any questions and conversation we have afterwards. Jeremiah is an assistant professor in the Department of Psychiatry. He's the current residency program director for psychiatry and the former director of medical student education in psychiatry, where he oversaw the psychiatry clerkship for our medical students. While leading the clerkship, Dr. Dickerson developed an interest in the medical humanities, and he incorporated an art of observation session at the Fleming Museum as part of the psychiatry teaching for all of our medical students. Most recently, he was a recipient of the 2023 Leonard Tao Humanism Award in Medicine. Let's give it up for Dr. Dickerson and Mary Lacy, and we look forward to listening to you both. I'm going to move this.
All right, can everyone hear me? Fantastic. First of all, thank you, Mary, for sharing your art with us and giving us your time. I was reflecting on sort of the different conversations that I was overhearing in the hallway and how discrepant in some ways those conversations are compared to like conversations that I hear in art museums when I'm not surrounded by medical professionals. So I hope to dig a little bit into that, but very rich. I guess my first question, Mary, we, in the setting of therapy, we often ask others to trust the process, right? Alluding to how work around emotions and making sense of past experiences can be hard, can be challenging, can be complicated, can be tedious. I imagine that making art is similar. So I'd love to hear from you, what sort of resonates with you when you hear the phrase trusting the process?
Yeah, I kind of pointed to this question in your list because this morning just was like jumped off the page for me. It is incredibly real for me to, today and in this chair and in the artwork I'm making in my studio at the moment. The work I'm making now it's so unknown to me, as this was right here, a year ago. And, right, it's also like, there's a gallery show coming up, there's a deadline, there's a pressure, who's going to be there, blah, 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 very loud in your head. And so there's just like all these psychological games going on. One of the most grounding things for me, and I do this every single day, is at the moment it's all about the nervous system. And so that's how I pay attention to where that's at. And if I can, trusting the process, as much as I love that saying, it's almost like it's hard to know where to start when someone tells you that. And the the most grounding way for me to enter that place is to tune in with my nervous system and figure out how can I regulate it? How can I support that? And then there's just so much, like, that unfolding thing
Yeah.
can happen. My first show at Soapbox was definitely where it was like the lineage of the anatomy. It was about the figure, drawing the figure, and the artist statement, one of the first lines in the artist statement, it was more of a poem form than this one, the show was called Dishes. Dishes exists because my nervous system has all the power. And so that's where that really started to take off for me. And it's interesting when I look back how, you know, that show was, again, it was, you know, the body from the outside, the figure. But in order to do that, I was studying anatomy in order to understand how weight was distributed. And, you know, it was like a big realization that your shoulder has depth, like that it goes back. And so, and also in all these doctor's appointments in my personal life, and it was the same reference images overlapping. And so that was where the epiphany, you know, eventually occurred, that was like, oh, let's go, you know, further into the, what I was clearly trying to get to, or was there. But I didn't see that coming. That was after that entire show. But looking back at the artist statement, it was, my nervous system has all the power.
Yeah.
You know, this show introduced me to my pelvis and, or my elbow, I think. So
it was there all along,
yeah,
essentially.
trust the process.
Trust the process. I'm curious about you talk about kind of engaging and learning anatomy, and I love how you talk about sort of the aesthetics of the anatomy, which I don't think we necessarily teach in the anatomy lab. I don't know if there's a question here, but it's interesting to think about, oh, here's the GI system from a structural point of view, how we kind of view it through the lens of medicine, but you as an artist kind of really try to appreciate the aesthetic kind of component of that, which is really neat.
Yeah. I've been learning to, you know, I think growing up somewhere along the lines, like, was you know, felt that art as a whole, and definitely that word aesthetics, was in vain, that there's a lot of vanity around beauty.
Yeah.
And recently I've been, I mean, the whole process of becoming an artist asked me to shed a lot of that. And specifically the last few years around that word beauty, in particular, I would, you know, if I thought something was just gorgeous, I felt like I was like a bad feminist or something, and or like not a good artist, because art is supposed to, you know, whatever. And I've it's not so much like the step before consciously thinking something's beautiful is, as I experience it, is like just to be drawn to something, like and you don't know why. And to trust the process, just let that be, like without judgment, without needing to know your why, and just go there. And that's what happened here for sure with the GI tract. I never, like, I went, when I was doing this, you know, I'd imagined going into anatomy. The first one I did was a mosaic pelvis, not the pelvis, it's out here. It's in a print of it is in Natalie's office. And then it was the skull here. And so I was thinking so much about bones. And personally, that's where a lot of my health was, you know, living in my bones, or problems, you know. And it wasn't and the plates felt just like had a very, like that touch, that sense of touch felt like plates and bones. They're just like a lot in common there, you know, they're not squishy and
Yeah.
soft. And so I did that piece, and I was just like so tunnel visioned on the bones, and just randomly came across just like a drawing of intestines, and it was like truly the most beautiful thing. It was just luscious to me. And
I love that.
and I went there. And it wasn't until later that like to let that unawareness in terms of why exist, you know, that was like a new concept to me. And so this was one of the real first times I felt that, you know, that I was aware that I felt that at that moment. And I was like, okay, we don't need to go there. We don't need to know everything yet though. And it was like about 6 months later, I was talking with a friend, and he did word association with these two pieces. And that one was pain, and this one was relief. And I love I mean, he was like, yeah, it feels like you like had a really good shit. Like, you know, didn't seem like the room was getting that, so I had to hand that one to you. But so I just love that, because when I was going through it, I was in I was in a pretty severe pain when I did that piece. And it was about 3 months later when I was experiencing just like the most phenomenal physical relief. And I just love that it took that perspective and time and someone else to just like say the obvious.
Yeah.
When you are, I mean, anyways, that's a long story, but the origin of this question was around aesthetics. So none of that story would have happened if there wasn't permission to appreciate them. Yeah,
to attend to it. Can you talk more to us about your relationship between your body and art? I guess, how has art been sort of a medicinal tool for you?
Art has been there for a long time for me now. It started in, I'd say in a pretty, not that I've ever done traditional art therapy, but I'd say that that is the shape it really took in the beginning. And just was it was my friend when I needed it. And then in the last like 4 or 5 years, it's been really just bizarre in the ways that it's been that word medicine for me. And I had a concussion 4.5 or so years ago that was just derailed me. And I began to learn, it took a while to learn this, but it was extraordinary. My physical symptoms from the concussion, migraines, fog, just like comprehension, were completely intertwined with my emotions. So if I got angry, I got a migraine. If I had a panic attack, my neck would physically move out of alignment. And when that physical movement happens, all the fog comes back, all the symptoms. Like I can be, when it's the good news is when it's in alignment, I feel amazing.
Yeah.
And it's not physical stress that knocks it out for me. Never has been. It's emotional. And so began to recognize that I didn't recognize it for a while, that I was having panic attacks that were knocking my neck out. And so once this was, I was like, oh my God, like what, like, where do you go from here? It's great. It's really helpful to understand it, because then, there's some agency, but that was when it was like, I need to smash some shit, like really hard. I had to go there. And I remember someone who had a studio down the way from me, I made a lot of noise, let's just say. I poked his head and he was just like, what are you doing? And it was like, I was like, I'm healing my concussion, was the only, like, I know you want a short answer, so here it is. And it felt like saying that, like it was the first time I'd said that out loud or owned it, as crazy as it sounds,
Breaking dishes was not prescribed by a doctor.
No.
Did your identity as a muralist change as a result of the concussion? Definitely.
It was really hard to, I mean, when you're a muralist, you're out there in the elements, you're out there with people, being people everywhere. And those interactions were really challenging. And I had to, it was, my studio was essentially outside. And for the first time, I got a studio that had a door that I could close. And that was, it invited me. I never had that privacy. I never had that space with art making. I love community projects, but that means a lot of opinions are involved. That means that, anyways, we'll stop there.
People are not shy about sharing their opinions, I imagine.
And you want to live, and we want involvement. We want that. So, it was just to have that time to experiment, or to also just to really work on my own taste and my own, so it was surprising. I felt like I went into the studio to shut the world out, and what happened was I made the most personal artwork of my whole life, and ended up letting everyone in.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It really is beautiful. What does the art of medicine mean to you? We often talk about sort of the art and science of what we do every day, and Dean Page reflected on it. As an artist, what is, and a patient, I guess, what does the art of medicine mean?
This was I had a little sneak peek at some of the questions, and this is the first one, and I was like, oh my God. It's a big one. But one thing I'm like, I feel like I don't have I don't have the answer yet in the way that really answers the specific question. But where I went, which I think we'll get there maybe with your help. So making this work, I was like, oh, medicine needs art. Like, yes, like I got that.
Yeah.
And I was excited for that. And what has been really surprising to me, it was my show in May, when Natalie came and Krista. I didn't even know the word narrative medicine until they came and introduced that term to me. So I'm still it's a mix of like, this is where, I've been in relationship, my art and my health has been in very close relationship since the beginning, but didn't have a lot of these terms. And so I'm learning a lot now. And I also don't know many doctors, so been very new. I would have expected a lot more resistance
Mm,
to the arts and their role in medicine. And it's been nothing but just support and intrigue, and also, and like, so many of the people that I'm meeting are artists as well, or have a relationship to that. And I have been loving the conversation. Like, one thing I love about the conversations, I went to a conference at Columbia, the Narrative Medicine Conference this fall, and this is where I really started to, where I met Jasmine. Notice this was I love how grounded the conversations about art are in the body, in the sensations of the body.
yeah.
And some point, like a couple months ago, was just pretty loose with a friend, just, you know, late night, heady conversation, making, you know, lost in conversation. And it was like, wait, does medicine need art, or does art need medicine? And because I can, like, conversations of art that just happen in a silo can, I didn't go to art school. I don't have, there's a big vocabulary that I'm missing there as well. And they can be, you know, there's a lot of, like, I just really appreciate when it's connected, when it's not in a silo, when it's connected. And I just think that like, going through the body, talking about the sensations of the body as you're experiencing art is just such a grounded way to experience it. Focusing on that in terms of a maker, as I make art, has made my art a lot stronger. And I just think it has a really good effect on art in a very reciprocal way.
Yeah, there definitely is a reciprocity there. And when I think of narrative, I think of story, right? And here we are all sort of holding your story as we kind of observe your art and kind of engage in dialogue around it. And there's power and privilege to that, but there's also vulnerability to that. And I'm curious what it's like for you to be here in this room with medical professionals, kind of being vulnerable about sort of what you've been through via your art.
Yeah. When I first started going into narrative medicine, I don't think I told you this, Natalie, but I was actually warned from an artist, just like, watch out. Because of the way that you know, as a patient, the microscope is on you. You're being observed and judged, and in a way, I'm doing the same thing. I'm like, well, let's do it all again. But it's also different.
Yeah.
Because I think I don't think it's quite, I would say it's because I have the microphone. And that's a big part of it. But it would be really easy for me to also sit up here and, like, you know, I definitely learned as a patient some really harmful things that I was too emotional or weak, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I believe those things, which was very ironic when my emotions and mental health was the key to my physical health. but it's, it'd be very easy for me also to sit here, even with the mic, and I mean, I'm doing it, it's happening, is to feel like you guys are the doctors, you guys are the experts, with your opinions and your, you know, authority over what is medically correct.
Yeah.
And it's just, I mean, the tool of art and learning and owning that it, you know, I figured it out over here.
Yeah.
You know, with some great medical professionals, but that my that I have authority over what happened
Yeah.
to me.
You mentioned agency before.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess my last question before we open it to the group is, what's your advice in slowing down and taking a pause? And, you know, I think we need to allow ourselves as physicians, as medical providers, time and space for reflection. How do we do that? What's your advice in terms of bringing that in an intentional way to our day to day?
Yeah, I definitely struggle with this myself. Art is also my job, so there is like a, there's pressure, there's timeline, there's deadlines, there's, and I'm extremely grateful to my partner, who is one of the first, like he'll say, Mary, get in the car. We are going on a hike. We're going, you know, it's like there's an interruption that happens. In the moments you would just resist it, want to resist it the hardest, is when
it's most important.
It's most important. So I think that like that structure, whether that's someone else saying or whether it's just a commitment to it being there, blocked out on your calendar, and taken very seriously.
Yeah.
Even if what you're doing is just going for a walk, or you know, doesn't have to be a very serious walk, but yeah, I definitely, it's hard.
It is hard. Well, certainly looking at art allows us to take a pause. So thank you again for sharing your pieces with us. I want to open it up to the group, thinking about sort of your reflections on the pieces. And if you have any questions for Mary, I believe there's a mic.
Hi, good evening. Thank you. In life, things break and we usually try to put them back together. Sometimes we can't, like the pottery and the ceramics. And when we can't put them back together, we can make something beautiful out of them. And in medicine, things also break and we try to put them back together, but sometimes we can't. And what lessons do you think we can get from art to kind of have that same process to make something beautiful out of the broken pieces in medicine?
Yeah, it's funny because I've come across the, you know, the metaphor of things breaking, putting it back together. All the parts become the whole, as you can imagine, and it actually doesn't feel quite so, from my experience, it doesn't have that effect of it all came together. You know, I often think about, and I have kept the pieces that don't make it into them. like ones I'm so attached to. And like, man, I know I'm thinking of them right now. Like it is, and letting those go, those pieces that don't ultimately make it in, because I'll think it's so perfect as an individual piece, but then, you know, I step back, I often blur my eyes in order to see. I'll like turn my head upside down. Like there's like a distance that you have to create to feel the composition as a whole. And if one of the pieces is being too loud or just standing out, that's often how I know it's not meant to be, that I have to let it go. And I will resist that for weeks because I'm so attached to a piece. So I've actually wanted to do something like a photography exhibit, like of the pieces that never made it. Because I'm doing the thing where I make all these pieces become a whole, but the story isn't quite so perfect here for me in that way. So that's where I had to start in order to go into wherever, you know, into the medicine side of things. It might, I mean, that sense of loss is unavoidable, perhaps. I'm curious, I would be curious where you go with what I just shared, because I'm not the medical professional.
Not about taking the broken pieces. For the folks on Zoom, no, it's a super profound answer. At least I took it that way, that sometimes you can't put the pieces back together, or at least not in a way which fit or make something beautiful, and that accepting that loss and letting some of those pieces go, even if they're meaningful and beautiful. That's pretty important, I think. Thank you.
And also it's here, you know, in its life, in its new life too, so.
So thanks for coming, and I'm excited to see you at the medical school. We talked about that. So you mentioned that in this room, like sitting in the chair with your microphone, you still consider us medical professionals to be experts. And you mentioned that in your time as a patient, you learned about vulnerability, about yourself, and kind of in the process of patient care. So when we were at the conference together, Dr. Rita Sharon kind of talked about the hierarchies that still exist and are kind of perpetuated into narrative medicine. So I'm wondering how we as physicians could improve patient care and or change in this space of narrative medicine to foster an environment for you as a patient to feel like an expert. And then as I wrote this question, I realized even the wording kind of still put us as experts. So I would love to hear your response.
I mean, I would say it's happening. It isn't, those are old lessons of mine, learning that. And at that conference, like, I felt incredibly welcomed and grateful, or people were grateful that I was there. Even I felt like probably the furthest from medicine there. And so I think that if your awareness as it is, you know, on it, is attuned to it, I would encourage you to trust that you're paying, you know, it's important to you and you're paying attention to it, and that it's happening, you know. I'd say that being in the narrative medicine community and here and just the reception, the positive reception to my work in the last year with the medical community is helping me shed that. So you're doing it, is my answer.
This is such a pleasure, and it's really a joy to hear your perspective on your work. I can't speak for others, but I myself am in awe of artists having no real talent myself, whether it's writing, whether it's visual, whether it's music or whatever. So you're the expert here. And we sit in admiration of what you do and are learning from you. Along that line, I have just kind of a simple question, and that is, I love the description of the pieces, for example, for that colon, as I see the various pieces. And I was wondering whether you take the pieces and they become part of the art and the representation of something anatomical in this case, or whether you break a piece to fit. And my impression in your describing, almost as if they're in a life all their own, the pieces you become fond of. I'm taking from you that you find them and then you identify where they fit. But can you tell us a little bit more about kind of the bond you can get with these pieces? And I almost think of wayward toys, that they're banished to not be part of the art. But can you tell us more about kind of the process of how you find the pieces to then put together and create the whole?
Yeah. So I talked about the smashing, very important, but almost the more important part of it came afterwards, because I'm very obsessive with my colors. I gotta organize them, and no two reds are the same. So it can't just be like a pile of red plates. It has to be like back organized. So after smashing, I had to sort them all back out. And that obviously is the lengthier, more tedious thing to do, but the art asked for it. And it was such a valuable process after that heightened adrenaline moment to do something slow, to do something with your hands. And if I was with other people, doing something like that, monotonous with your hands, allowed for a really incredible conversation, and the kind of conversation that can have pauses and so I loved that part of the process unexpectedly. I did enter into the object of dishes. I spent a summer working with an artist in Chicago who uses a lot of, he doesn't use paint, he uses a lot of objects in this way. And I had never come across, I didn't really understand that previously. There's a lot of art out there that I don't understand in the world too. And so that was a new concept for me, to take an object that already was emotionally charged for the artist and to make something with it. And so when I realized that, I was like, oh, what's emotionally charged for me? And it just immediately, I knew it was dishes. So that is definitely where the origin came from, that charge for me, and that smash. And then at some point in the process, that was really the first show, I would say. And then when I was making the heart, that was, I remember, it was a bigger piece, so it needed bigger pieces. And I found myself cutting straight into I'd also bought myself a tile saw, which was incredible because my wrist was breaking down under the tile nippers. So it meant I could cut right into a plate. And at first I felt like that was cheating, that I was breaking the whole metaphor of destruction, pieces falling apart, putting them all back together. But truly the smash, all of that started to feel like a chore, like a burden to the process. And at some point I was like, actually, like, that's a good thing that I'm not angry anymore, that I don't have that in me. So we can let that go, and we don't have to, we can cut right into the plate. And one thing I noticed was that I started seeing, you know, as I'm going to every dump and Goodwill, I started like seeing a plate and being excited. I was like, oh, this is like, you know, like one of the ones here, I just, like the one that has all I saw capillaries, like just immediately. Or I saw just flesh on a different one, or like, oh, this could be hair. So it wasn't like they became abstracted to me. They became colors, they became textures. And that is the best part to me, just the way that evolved.
Hello. I guess looking at your work and seeing, you know, the gallery that you made and hearing you talk about the extensive process it kind of sounded similar to, I'm in medical school, so it kind of sounded similar to like the process of becoming a doctor. It's like a lot of continuous work and trust that one day it'll be worth it. And it will be, but
Totally.
but I feel like interspersed with that are moments where I sometimes am reaching deep into myself to find motivation to like keep going.
Yeah.
And I feel like the artists struggle for inspiration and the struggle for like that, you know, moment of, oh, I have like the drive and the creativity to do this now is kind of similar. So I wanted to ask for some advice in terms of like, how do you, in those moments where, you know, you've worked really hard, but you need to keep going, how do you find that inspiration and drive?
Yeah, it's hard. Definitely in one of them right now. So it's a harder moment to answer that question, for sure. Being here helps. Being being here helps. That community. And I think that I also look at like that's an old feeling. That I can point to a million other times I felt that way, and that it moved. That, you know, this too shall pass. Feels just a good companion that for me always has been. And I'm loving right now. It's almost like I feel like I'm looking. I fell in love with surprise, that experience of surprise. I think I might be like a little too obsessed with it at the moment, that I'm like looking for it everywhere. And so how are you surprised if you're obsessed with finding surprise? So that feels like one of the tasks at hand for me, to trust that it will come, like, but that looking for it is not exactly the best way to find it.
Thank you so much, Mary, for sharing your work and a part of yourself and the space with us tonight. I'm really grateful for that, so thank you. I was wondering if you could speak a little bit about the color palette that you choose for your work. I know when you talked about the word association, you described pain with that piece and relief with this piece. And I'm wondering if the color palette's intentional or if it just kind of creates itself as you're doing your work. Thanks.
Yeah, I would say more the latter, that it creates itself. When I get a little too intentional or too prescriptive with it, I can end up in that holding on place of holding, being attached to a certain piece or a certain color. So it tells me a lot of what it needs and what it wants. And I feel aware of, with this piece, I felt aware of wanting it to feel alive. That was very with me. I was like, it's like I could hear it, like, I don't know, you guys know. Like the gurgle or the squish. Peristalsis. Okay. Peristalsis. What? Okay. So I'd say like that was where the majority of the awareness lived. So but how the color that would achieve that, it's trial and error wherever that I can feel it, that sensation. Like with the heart, I remember like Alive was very there. I was like, I want this, like, I want you to basically hear the pump. I want, and the flow, like it's very, I want it to be very wet. And it's the heart, this is a good one to talk about that. I have a very funny relationship with the color blue. If you look, there's no blue here. I have tried many times. And I can't do it. The only places that blue is in my twice, literally in like all the mosaics I've done. I did a self-portrait and it was in the blanket. And I did a portrait and it was in the scarf. So it wasn't on the body itself. It was in fabric. And with the heart, I was like, oh, like this is it. I get to use the color blue. I went in with that. Which I feel like I've heard different things about blood actually being blue or not. I don't know. This is where I'm not the expert at all. But that was what I thought. And went into it for weeks believing that and having, hundreds of pieces of blue. And it was not working. And I didn't know why. And I wasn't getting that alive thing. And this is actually one of the most iconic moments I think of when my partner said, Mary, like, get in the car. Yeah. And we went on a canoe ride to the Swift River in Massachusetts, near where we live, which is close to the Quabbin, if anyone knows. It's a reservoir, a man-made reservoir, and it has this river. I don't know if it's going out or in or what, but it's bizarre. It is not like, it feels like you're in Florida for some reason. Like it's very tropical, and something with it being man-made has to do with that. So there was a lot of surprise in just, I suddenly was in tropical Florida. That's what, like the water's clear and you can see, it was just wild. And it was the end of May, beginning of June, everything was green. It was just the most bright, it was unbelievable. And it was like, oh, the answer is green. That aliveness, that liquid, the wet, the flow, all of that came from the river for me. And yeah, it was just not, I would never have predicted that.
So I noticed that most of your work is made of hard things, and you talked about bone and hard and what you were feeling in your own body. I wonder if you can talk a little bit about the process that created the anatomy of the wedding dress that's on the wall. I know there's another one that's made of tile or ceramic, but
Yeah.
shifting to a different medium that
Yeah.
feels like more compressible somehow.
Yeah. It was definitely a big shift for me. The heart that I was just talking about preceded that shift in a pretty direct way. I mean, like I said, I was just going for that sensation of alive, and I got it. I was like, I had a brace on my wrist. I like was, but I got it. I was hurting. And I delivered it to the client, and it's a big piece. It's about the size of the pelvis. And it was in a crate, and we opened the crate, and there was a crack that ran across the whole thing. One crack, but it made it all the way across. And the crate suddenly felt like a casket, and we lifted it out of the crate. It was very heavy, so we had these straps that were underneath the piece, and it took 4 people to lift it up and walk it onto the table, and that felt very funeral-y. And to me, it was like that crack was like something won that wasn't me. Like that in that game of, can you make this thing alive? It broke. And all that reference to the funeral as well. Just like, I would lost it. I mean, I didn't lose it. I just couldn't speak. It really got me in that moment, surrounded by, it was the unveiling of the piece. And what I ended up doing was using an X-Acto knife and eardrop, whatever mechanism for droplets in your ear was the right tool for putting grout. I put grout in that syringe. And so I could get a very fine line and filled the crack in with grout, the same, stuff in the inside there. So it was a very beautiful crack. Just like followed the whole rule of the thirds in art, where you're like, it was just like, you couldn't have asked for a better situation. If it was the situation. So it really just honoring the crack became the move. So if you look close at that piece, you'll see it. And I came home from that, just like, I went back to the shed, to my studio, and suddenly the plates felt so cold and hard, and I was getting headaches. I was like, suddenly the noise of all the pieces clanging, like I just had never heard it before. And it was giving me headaches. And like, I just had this, like, I can't touch this stuff feeling. And that was when I was like, I need to do something soft. In order to do these mosaics, I'm wearing a respirator, I'm wearing earmuffs, I'm wearing a brace on my wrist, I'm wearing coveralls that I take off when I go inside the house because of the dust. Like it's actually quite harsh on the system. And it was like, wait, like fabric, like a pillow? Like I could be in my sweatpants, could be inside. I just needed that softness. And it was also, you know, the fact that this piece couldn't absorb like one fault. I mean, it did, and I'm very proud of it and how it all went, but that a friend told me this. I was like, you know, it was perfect, but not what I wanted to hear at the time, where, you know, this artwork has such, you know, rigid straight lines, like there's, you know, the cement very clean. I'm like obsessed with how it pours. And she knows the truth of me is that, you know, my car's a mess, like I'm late places, like there's just a little more chaos in my life than is visible in my artwork. And she said, could you let a little bit of that in to the piece? And so for my show that was in May that I've been working on for 2 years, come the show, to take the show piece, the biggest piece, and say, I'm gonna do something that I've never done before. Look, I've never sewn. I did a lot of beading as a kid. It was like signing myself up for failure. You know, there's just was a commitment to error in that piece, in choosing those materials. That was really fun. Yeah.
Hi, and thank you. Your work is beautiful. And I kept thinking about bone china that has real bone in it. I
Yeah.
love that you've connected that. So you talked about being a muralist, being out there, and you talked about having studied the figure and the body and your medical experience, and then turning inward and closing the door and healing through breaking and recreating. And you made this beautiful art, and then you take it out, and the art world's all about critics again. And so I'm wondering, so I'm a pediatrician, and I'm curious as to where your inner strength is, that you've managed to take the fact that people have made you feel powerless, that you've had to connect your emotions to your health, and you found all that strength on your own, it sounds like, and you've made something beautiful again and again and again, and then you've taken it back out. And knowing that it's going to get reviewed, people are going to say stuff about it. And so how do you keep finding that inner strength, or where does it come from, this taking it back out?
Mhm.
You either have the physician as critic or the art
Mhm.
person as critic.
I heard something recently that I loved. What's the book? It's on every bestseller table these days. It's free audio book. The Creative Life or something, whatever. And it was a free audio book, so I needed a little cheesy art boost in my life recently, so I went for it, and it was amazing. And one of the things that they said was, sharing art is the price of making it, which that resonated with me. Particularly, it's my profession, so which is a big privilege. That's how I get to dedicate my time. And it also keeps me accountable to sharing it. And so, I mean, it feels like there's no if I share it. It's just one of my responsibilities. And I learn a lot I'd say I learn more from, even if I don't appreciate or disagree or get really angry with a critique, there's it's really exciting at that point to, like I'm just so isolated a lot of the time in the studio. And I would say it's much more exciting than much else, just to like what someone said about relief, you know, and I like, overall, I like that part of the process. Yeah. I don't know. I don't even like, I don't
Yeah,
even
well-
know what the word brave, I don't really like think of the word bravery that much. Yeah. Yeah. You know, I would say a lot of growth came with mural making, because you are like, the first mural I did, exterior mural I did, was on my parents' barn. And I found some scaffolding, not to use as a ladder, but to hang a tarp up so that nobody could see me working. They love telling that story. And I did a bunch of interior murals after that. And then the next public mural I did was the hummingbird. And it was my first day was the first day of the farmer's market that year. And I had no idea what I was doing. I had never done a mural where my feet were off the ground. So taking a measurement, like my tape measure wouldn't go 20 feet. And everyone's like taking pictures of me. And I'm just like faking it until I got home and like Google searched how to paint a mural. So, and then you're just exposed. Your process is very exposed there. I remember like needing help parking my new bucket truck at the time. I needed like, people to do this or whatever. So I just asked some strangers, and they were just like, who, like, what, who? They were so confused that I was gonna touch that wall. They just thought I was like a wreck. And like 3 weeks later, they came by and were like, they were honest. They said that. They're like, we had no hope for you. And at that point, and this is amazing now. And so that became pretty common in the mural making, was like, it got dark and I couldn't fix it to the point where I felt okay leaving it. I just had to leave it. And I have to remember that now when I get to prepare everything to bring it out, for sure. Yeah, I don't know. I think there's almost no choice. So that is for me, and there's a little bit of advantage there to doing it when you have to. So I don't know if I would identify with brave.
I think we can take one more question.
So I love your work. Thank you so much for sharing it with us. I wondered if you could talk about the vault. I'm so drawn to that. Is that the name of it?
The fortress.
The fortress.
Similar.
I knew it was
Yeah.
something like that. Yeah. Could you talk
Yeah.
about the fortress?
Yeah. The fortress is anatomically the lower back. I had my lower back went out, and with that, I feel when my neck goes out, I have neurological symptoms. It's not very connected to the neck itself. But when my lower back goes out, it is a very acute, intense, you know, as you, I'm sure many in the room know. And, you know, I couldn't sit. It was either standing or lying down sort of situation. And to a lot of the work for this show, Anatomy of, you know, there definitely were the pelvis, and there's body parts that were, are the ones that I broke, or et cetera, the problem child. And, but I also came across so many body parts that I broke my 5th metatarsal twice, and I never knew that there was a 1 through 4. Like, I just didn't know that. I never heard the word 5th as a relational thing. So there was all these like new, exciting things that just had been working this whole time. And to, you know, I have a funny relationship to fragility. I broke 7 bones, 1 a year, one every year for 7 years. And so, for example, I do all these murals. I go up, I've never been afraid of heights. I go up 7 stories, and it's like, I'm at peace. Like, I love it in bucket boom trucks. They're just like my favorite thing. But I'm terrified of the street curb. Like, when I walk, I'm like, make sure I'm on that side of the person that is closer to the street curb, which is like 4 inches or whatever. And there's a embodiment of that fear, that protective place I lived in for a long time, of that like obsessive caution. And that, you know, just that relationship to being broken had a psychological effect. And I'd say a lot of this show was to unlearn that, to feel how strong I was now, that to not live in that place. Like, it was more harmful when you do that paranoia, especially with that relationship with the concussion, when panic attacks are what, anyways. So believing and embodying my own strengths, my own physical strengths, was a big part of this. So when my back went out for Fortress, I felt the task was to remember when what did it feel like when I felt strong and pain-free. And so that piece is like a memory of that trying to bring it back. So it's a funny, like, someone later in time, you know, 6 months later, told me that piece, the word protective came up for them. Like, it's and I named it Fortress because it feels very like bricks. Like, and I'm like holding myself up. But so there's like a rigidness in it, but I wanted it to like let the breeze in. I wanted you to feel like, I wanted the tree to be, you know, it's not blowing crazy. The movement is not, you know, like, feel this crazy sense of movement in the piece. There's a lot of stillness going on in that piece, that's the movement. But just like the breeze on your cheek. That's.
I think we're gonna bring the evening to an end, but I need to make some acknowledgements, and what a special evening it's been. First of all, Jeremiah Dickerson, I think every interviewer should be a psychiatrist, because you're comfortable, you're listening, you're allowing the person you're talking with to speak and giving them the space. So you're a real pro. So thank you for that. I want to acknowledge Liz Dorman in the back who handed me this microphone and organizes all of these events here and has done just an amazing job. And I think back to with you and Patricia and Mary as we were putting this together, and I can't imagine it turning out better. And for Mary, thank you so much. I think you imparted such wisdom and some wit to on us. And my favorite 3 words, as we were talking about how you find inspiration for going on in, as the analogy was medicine and art, is being here helps. I love that, those 3 words. Think of that, being here helps. You know, sharing this experience of talking about art, talking about medicine, how they're intertwined, sharing some food and drink together and some camaraderie and feeling a part of the community and being here helps. So with that, thank you so much. Thanks for everybody for being here together. Really a special evening. Get home safely. Thank you.